The unexpected gift. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Starbase Epsilon, watching the approaching consortium vessel with growing unease. Its sleek, crystalline hull caught the light of the nearby binary stars, creating prismatic patterns that would normally have captivated her. Today, they only heightened her anxiety. "Commander, the consortium delegation requests permission to dock," her AI assistant chirped. Sarah squared her shoulders, adjusting her dress uniform. "Permission granted. Have them meet me in the diplomatic suite." She'd earned numerous commendations during the Nexus War, but this reward from the consortium felt wrong on every level. The diplomatic suite's doors whispered open, revealing 3 consortium representatives. Tall, ethereal beings with iridescent skin and flowing robes that seemed to defy gravity. Between them stood a figure that made Sarah's breath catch. A Meridian, one of the galaxy's most ancient and respected species. The Meridian was shorter than his escorts, with deep blue skin that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, studied her with an intensity that suggested profound intelligence. Unlike the flowing robes of the consortium members, he wore simple gray clothing that marked him as their gift. "Commander Chen," the lead representative's voice chimed like crystal bells. "In recognition of your exceptional service during the Nexus War, the consortium presents you with Kexizi, a scholar of the Meridian Archive. His knowledge and abilities are now yours to command." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. The consortium's practice of gifting sentient beings had always disturbed her, but she'd never expected to be put in this position. She forced herself to maintain diplomatic composure. "The consortium is most generous," she managed. "However, I must understand the terms of this arrangement." The representative's expression remained serene. Kexizi was found accessing restricted sections of the archive. His punishment is to serve as a living repository of knowledge for a worthy recipient. You may use his abilities as you see fit. Sarah glanced at Kexizi, noting the subtle tension in his posture. His lower set of eyes remained downcast, but the upper pair met hers briefly. In that moment, she saw not submission, but carefully contained defiance. After the consortium delegation departed, Sarah and Kexizi stood in uncomfortable silence. The diplomatic suite, usually a place of negotiation and compromise, felt suffocating. "I want to be clear," Sarah finally said, turning to face him directly. "I didn't ask for this arrangement, and I don't believe in owning sentient beings, whatever you allegedly did. I accessed files containing evidence of consortium corruption." Kexizi interrupted, his voice surprisingly melodic despite its bitter edge. "They couldn't execute me without causing diplomatic incidents with the remaining Meridian enclaves, so they found a more elegant solution." Sarah's tactical mind immediately began processing implications. "You found something they wanted to hide badly enough to risk gifting you to a human military officer." The consortium's public face of benevolent governance masks something far darker. Kexi's bioluminescent patterns shifted, creating complex geometries that Sarah suspected reflected emotional states. "They believed sending me to a remote starbase would ensure those secrets remained buried." Sarah moved to her desk, activating privacy protocols with a gesture. "They clearly didn't research me very thoroughly. I've spent my career fighting against exactly this kind of abuse of power." She met all 4 of his eyes. "I'm not going to treat you as property, Kexizi, but I would like to know what you discovered." The patterns across his skin shifted again, surprise flickering through the geometric displays. "You would risk your position to investigate the consortium." "I would risk my position to do what's right," Sarah corrected. "But first, we need to establish trust. You'll have full access to public areas of the starbase. I'll assign you quarters in the civilian section. You're not a prisoner here." "And if I chose to leave?" Sarah smiled grimly. "I'd help you. But I suspect you stayed in the archive, even knowing the risk, because whatever you found was too important to abandon. I'm offering you a chance to continue that work, with the resources of this station at your disposal." Kexizi was silent for a long moment, his patterns shifting through complex sequences Sarah couldn't interpret. Finally, he spoke. The consortium maintains power through a network of carefully cultivated lies. They've hidden the true history of their rise to dominance, including the fate of several species who opposed them. Like the Meridians? Sarah asked softly. My people weren't defeated in war, as official records claim. We were systematically undermined from within, our civilization fractured through carefully orchestrated political manipulations. What remains of us now is carefully controlled, our knowledge and abilities used to strengthen consortium control. Sarah's tactical training kicked in, analyzing potential moves and countermoves. They didn't just give you to me as a punishment. They're watching to see what I do with you. Yes, if you help me expose the truth, you'll be marked as an enemy of the consortium. Your career, possibly your life, would be forfeit. Sarah walked back to the viewport, watching the consortium ship prepare for departure. Its crystalline beauty now seemed like a facade, hiding rot beneath. My entire career has been built on protecting people from those who would abuse power, she said quietly. I'm not going to stop now just because the enemy is bigger. She turned back to Kexizi, noting how his patterns had shifted to something more harmonious. We'll need to be careful. Build trust. Document everything. Create backups they can't trace or destroy. A plan was already forming in her mind. How much do you know about human history? Some. Your species is notably resilient and adaptable. We also have a long history of resistance movements and fighting against overwhelming odds. Sarah smiled. Let's start with getting you settled in. Then we can discuss how to best use the consortium's gift in ways they never intended. As they left the diplomatic suite, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. What had begun as an ethical crisis was transforming into something else. A chance to right a wrong, to challenge injustice. And in Kexizi's shifting patterns, she sensed not just an ally, but perhaps the beginning of something that would change both their lives and the galaxy forever. Breaking barriers. The next few weeks aboard Starbase Epsilon brought changes that neither Sarah nor Kexizi had anticipated. What began as cautious cooperation evolved into something more complex as they worked to unravel the consortium's secrets while maintaining appearances. Sarah found herself spending increasingly long hours in the station's research center, where Kexizi had been methodically transferring his knowledge into the secure databases she'd established. His insights into ancient civilizations went far beyond anything in official records, painting a picture of a galaxy far richer and more dangerous than most humans imagined. The consortium didn't emerge from nothing, Kexizi explained one evening, his bioluminescent patterns creating elaborate diagrams in the dimmed light of the research center. They built their power by studying and selectively revealing technologies from dead civilizations, but they've hidden the true fate of those species. Sarah leaned forward, studying the patterns he was generating. You're saying they deliberately suppressed information about multiple advanced civilizations. Why? Because the pattern of their disappearances suggests something the consortium doesn't want known. Kexi's upper eyes narrowed while his lower ones tracked the data scrolling across nearby screens. Each civilization reached a similar point of development before vanishing, not through war or natural disaster, but as if they'd simply transcended. Transcended to where? Sarah asked, her tactical mind already considering implications. That's what I was trying to discover when I was caught. There are references in the deepest archives to something called the Nexus Path, not to be confused with your recent war. It seems to be a method of evolutionary advancement, a way for species to move beyond physical existence. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, and the consortium has been preventing species from discovering this path, keeping them locked in physical form. Precisely. They maintain power by ensuring no species advances beyond their control. The gifting system isn't just about punishment. It's about keeping potentially dangerous individuals under surveillance. As Kexizi spoke, his patterns shifted to something Sarah had begun to recognize as excitement or urgency. Over the past weeks, she'd found herself becoming increasingly attuned to his emotional displays, learning to read the subtle variations in his bioluminescence. "Show me what you found," she said, moving closer to examine the data he was displaying. Their shoulders nearly touched, and she noticed his patterns flutter briefly at the proximity, something that happened more frequently lately. Hours slipped by as they pieced together fragments of information, cross-referencing historical records with Kexazi's extensive knowledge. Sarah found herself repeatedly amazed by the depth of his understanding, not just of facts and figures, but of the interconnections between seemingly unrelated events. "You're different from what I expected," Kexi said suddenly, breaking a comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Oh," Sarah looked up from her notes. "And what did you expect from a human military commander?" His patterns shifted to something she hadn't seen before. Uncertainty, perhaps. The consortium teaches that humans are crude, aggressive, focused only on immediate gains. But you? He paused, all four eyes focusing on her. "You seek understanding. You question everything, even your own assumptions. It's admirable." Sarah felt warmth rise in her cheeks at the unexpected praise. "Well, you're not what I expected either." The official records describe Meridians as cold, purely analytical beings, but your passion for truth, for justice, it's very— She searched for the right word— human. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then a priority alert flashed across the main screen, shattering the silence. "Consortium vessel approaching," the station's AI announced, requesting emergency docking for routine inspection. Sarah's military training kicked in immediately. "They're checking up on us. We need to secure this data." She began implementing encryption protocols, while Kexazi's pattern swirled with barely contained anxiety. "If they discover what we've been researching," he began. "They won't," Sarah cut him off, her voice firm. "I've dealt with surprise inspections before, but we need to be careful about how we present our relationship." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "They'll expect to see some evidence that I'm utilizing their gift." Kexazi's pattern stabilized into something more controlled. "You want me to play the role they expect? Just for a short time. Let them see what they want to see, a human commander making use of a valuable resource." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. "I know it's asking a lot." "No," he interrupted, his pattern shifting to a determination she'd come to admire. "You've treated me with respect, as an equal. I trust you. We'll give them the show they expect." As they prepared for the inspection, Sarah found herself increasingly aware of how much had changed in just a few weeks. What had begun as an unwanted arrangement had evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. And perhaps, though neither of them was ready to acknowledge it, something more. The consortium inspectors would see what they expected to see, a gifted Meridian scholar serving his human master. They wouldn't notice the subtle ways Sarah and Kexazi communicated through glances and pattern shifts, or the careful dance they performed to protect their growing cache of dangerous knowledge. What had started as an effort to expose corruption was becoming something far more significant, a challenge to the very foundations of how the galaxy was governed. And in the process, two beings from vastly different species were discovering that the barriers between them were far more permeable than either had imagined. As the inspection ship drew closer, Sarah found herself making a silent promise. Whatever came next, she would protect not just the truth they were uncovering, but also this unexpected connection that defied everything the consortium stood for. In Kexazi, she had found not just an ally, but someone who made her question everything she thought she knew about the boundaries between species. Hidden truths. The consortium inspection left Sarah and Kexazi on edge, but it also provided unexpected opportunities. The inspectors' presence required them to access certain secure networks that left traces they could follow back to deeper layers of consortium data. Late one night, weeks after the inspection, Sarah found Kexazi in their now shared research space. His patterns were cycling through urgent configurations she'd never seen before. "You need to see this," he said without preamble. All four eyes were fixed on a holographic display showing what appeared to be star charts, but with overlays she didn't recognize. "I've decoded part of the data stream we captured during the inspection." Sarah moved to stand beside him, noting how his patterns brightened slightly at her proximity, something that happened more frequently now. "What am I looking at?" "Proof." His voice carried an undertone she'd learned to recognize as barely contained excitement. "These are tracking patterns for what the consortium calls evolutionary surges, moments when civilizations approach the nexus path." The display shifted, showing hundreds of points of light across the galaxy. As the timeline advanced, clusters of lights winked out simultaneously, each extinction event. Sarah asked, her throat tight. "No, each intervention." Kexi's patterns darkened. "The consortium doesn't just prevent species from advancing. They actively suppress any civilization showing signs of approaching transcendence." Sarah studied the pattern, her military training recognizing the precision of the operations. These weren't random events. They were coordinated strikes, probably using technology they'd preserved from previous civilizations. "Exactly. And look at this timeline." He gestured, and the display zoomed in on recent history. Humanity is approaching a similar point of development. That's why they've been so eager to integrate human worlds into their power structure. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Nexus War. It wasn't just about territory or resources, was it? No. Your species showed signs of rapid advancement during that period. The war was manufactured to drain resources and focus humanity's attention on physical conflicts rather than evolutionary development. Sarah's mind raced through memories of battles fought, friends lost. And now they're watching us more closely than ever, using things like the gifting system to monitor potential threats. She turned to face him fully. "Like you." Kexi's patterns shifted to something more personal, more vulnerable. "I wasn't gifted to you just because I accessed restricted files. They knew my research was leading me toward these truths. By putting me here, they thought they could monitor both of us, a dangerous Meridian scholar and a human commander who had shown too much potential. But they didn't expect us to work together," Sarah said softly. "They didn't expect this." She gestured between them, acknowledging the undefined but undeniable connection that had grown. His patterns rippled in a way she'd come to associate with deep emotion. "No. They believe their system of control is perfect because it's built on the assumption that different species can never truly understand each other, never form real bonds. Then that's their weakness." Sarah began pacing, her tactical mind engaging. "If we can prove that their entire system is built on lies, that they've been actively suppressing species' natural development, it would shatter their authority," Kexi finished. "But we'd need irrefutable proof, and a way to distribute it that they couldn't contain." Sarah stopped pacing, a dangerous smile forming. "Actually, we might have both. The consortium's own communication network, the one they used during the inspection. It reaches every major world in their territory." Kexi's patterns brightened with understanding, "And I know how their encryption protocols work. If we could access a high-level terminal, like the one on the diplomatic vessel that's due to visit next month." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Carrying the regional overseer who's coming to evaluate my proper use of my gift." Their eyes met, all of his with both of hers, and something electric passed between them. They were no longer just commander and scholar, human and Meridian. They were partners on the edge of something world-changing. "It would be dangerous," Kexi said, his patterns showing concern. "If we're caught." Sarah moved closer, deliberately entering the space where their energy fields overlapped. She learned that for Meridians, this was an intimate gesture, and she watched his patterns shift in response. "Everything worthwhile is dangerous," she said softly. "But we have something they never expected. Trust. Real trust, not built on power or control, but on choice and understanding." Kexi's patterns swirled with complex emotions. "Sarah, It was the first time he used her given name. What they would do to you if we fail, I couldn't bear. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her hand near one of his pattern nodes. She didn't quite touch, that would be too much, too soon, but the proximity made his bioluminescence dance. We won't fail, she said with quiet certainty, because we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. We're fighting for every species' right to choose their own path, to evolve as they're meant to. And she hesitated, then continued, we're fighting for the right to choose who we care about, regardless of what form they take. His patterns synchronized with her biorhythms in a way that made her breath catch. It was the closest thing to a kiss that their different physiologies would allow, and it carried more meaning than any physical gesture could have. In that moment, surrounded by star charts showing centuries of suppressed evolution, they'd made their choice. They would expose the consortium's lies, protect humanity's future, and perhaps show the galaxy that true connection transcends all barriers. As they began planning their dangerous mission, Sarah realized that the consortium had made a fatal mistake. In trying to control evolution, they had forgotten that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technological advancement or political power. It's the connection between beings who choose to trust each other, to fight for each other, to believe in something bigger than themselves. And in that, perhaps, lay the real path to transcendence. The choice. The diplomatic vessel carrying the regional overseer hung in space like a crystalline dagger pointed at Starbase Epsilon's heart. Sarah watched it approach from her office, her outward calm masking the storm of emotions beneath. Final preparations are complete, Kexi said quietly from behind her. His patterns were deliberately steady, too steady, revealing his tension to her experienced eye. Once the overseer begins the inspection, we'll have approximately 18 minutes to access their systems. Sarah turned to face him, drinking in the sight of his bioluminescent patterns one last time before they had to perform their carefully rehearsed roles. And you're certain about the failsafes. If anything goes wrong, the data package will automatically transmit to every resistance cell I've identified. His upper eyes met hers while his lower set monitored the approaching ship. Though if we fail, they may not survive long enough to use it. The weight of what they were attempting pressed down on them both. They had spent the last month preparing, gathering evidence, building their case against the consortium. But more than that, they had spent it growing closer, discovering depths of connection that defied the consortium's fundamental beliefs about species separation. Commander Chen, the station AI announced, the Overseer's party requests docking clearance. Sarah straightened her uniform, her command mask sliding into place. Grant clearance. Initiate diplomatic protocols. She turned to Kexi, her voice softening. Ready? His patterns shifted to something she'd never seen before, a complex symphony of emotion that made her breath catch. Sarah, before we do this, there's something you should know. We agreed no goodbyes, she said firmly, though her heart raced. Not goodbye. Truth. His patterns intensified. The Nexus path isn't just about technological advancement. It's about consciousness evolution, the ability to transcend physical form. But the research I found suggests it requires something the consortium never considered possible. True resonance between different species. Sarah's mind raced ahead of his words. The connection we've developed is unprecedented in documented history, a human and a meridian achieving psychological and energetic synchronization. His patterns rippled with excitement. We're not just fighting the consortium's political power, we're proving their entire worldview wrong. The station AI interrupted. Overseer's party approaching main airlock. Sarah moved closer to Kexi, entering their shared energy field one last time before they had to maintain their public distance. Whatever happens next, know that you changed everything I thought I knew about what's possible. His patterns synchronized with her biorhythms in their own private form of embrace. Then, as the airlock cycled, they separated, falling into their assigned roles. The Overseer swept in like a storm of crystalline authority, flanked by guards whose organic forms had been so enhanced by consortium technology that they seemed more machine than living being. Sarah noted how they positioned themselves, not just for ceremony, but for combat. "Commander Chen," the overseer's voice chimed like breaking glass, "we are most interested in evaluating your use of our gift." Their multifaceted eyes turned to Kexizi, who had assumed the properly submissive posture of a gifted being. "Has it proved valuable?" "Extraordinarily," Sarah replied, matching the overseer's formal tone. "Would you care to observe a demonstration of the knowledge integration we've achieved?" The overseer inclined their crystalline head. "Lead on, Commander." Sarah led the party to the research center, every step part of their carefully choreographed plan. As she began presenting their official research projects, she tracked the guards' positions, waiting for the precise moment when their attention would be divided. The next 18 minutes unfolded like a complex dance. While Sarah kept the overseer engaged with carefully prepared demonstrations, Kexi worked at his terminal, his authorized access masking the deeper infiltration into the diplomatic vessel's systems. Each second stretched like an eternity, each casual gesture hiding layers of meaning between them. Then one of the guards shifted position, slightly out of pattern. Sarah saw Kexizi's patterns flicker with alarm a moment before the overseer spoke. "Fascinating presentation, Commander. Though perhaps not as fascinating as the unauthorized transmissions we detected during our approach." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarah maintained her composure, mind racing through contingencies. "I'm not sure I understand." "Oh, I think you do." The overseer's crystalline form caught the light menacingly. "Did you truly believe we wouldn't monitor every quantum fluctuation around a gifted meridian scholar? Every energy pattern?" Their voice hardened. "Every forbidden resonance between species." The guards moved with shocking speed, weapons materializing from seemingly nowhere. But they hadn't counted on what a lifetime of military service had taught Sarah about reading threats, or what months of deep connection had given her and Kexizi. They moved as one, their voluntary synchronization achieving what the consortium's technology never could. Sarah's combat training merged with Kexizi's psychic abilities in a dance that sent guards sprawling. Alarms blared as they fought their way toward the primary communication hub, where their prepared data package waited. "You cannot stop evolution." Kexizi's voice carried over the chaos, his patterns blazing with defiance. "No species can be forever trapped in forms that no longer serve them." The overseer's response was cut off by a burst of energy that nearly took Sarah's head off. She rolled, came up firing, her shots precisely targeted to disable rather than kill. They weren't fighting for vengeance. They were fighting for truth. As they reached the hub, Sarah covered while Kexizi began the final sequence. The overseer's voice rang out again, now threaded with something like fear. "You would destroy millennia of careful order for what? Some misguided notion of freedom." Sarah's reply was interrupted by Kexizi's patterns flaring with triumph. "Transmission complete," he announced. "Every world, every station, every ship in consortium space just received proof of their lies." The overseer's crystalline form seemed to vibrate with rage. "Then you've doomed yourselves for nothing. Even with the truth, they'll never accept." They never finished the sentence. Throughout the station, throughout the sector, throughout consortium space, every communication channel lit up with the same message. The truth about suppressed evolution, about the nexus path, about the possibility of connection between species. And as proof of that last point, as Sarah and Kexizi stood together facing whatever came next, their energy patterns synchronized in a way that made even the overseer fall silent in awe. The choice they had made wasn't just about exposing lies. It was about showing the galaxy a new way forward, one where artificial barriers between species fell away in favor of genuine understanding. In that moment, facing either doom or dawn, they had already achieved something the consortium had deemed impossible: true transcendence of form through the power of connection. The alarms kept blaring, but Sarah smiled, feeling Kexizi's patterns harmonize with her own biorhythms. Whatever came next, they had changed everything, not just for themselves, but for every species seeking its own path to evolution. A new beginning. 3 months after the transmission that shook the foundations of consortium power, Sarah stood at her familiar viewport on Starbase Epsilon. But now she watched a very different kind of traffic flow through the sector. Ships of all species and designs, coming together for the first Galactic Congress of Free Peoples. The Andromeda delegation has just arrived, Kexi said, his patterns dancing with excitement as he joined her. That makes representatives from 27 major species, all gathering to discuss the path forward. Sarah smiled at his deliberate emphasis on path. Since their revelation about the consortium's suppression of evolutionary advancement, the term had taken on new meaning across the galaxy, and the latest research confirms everything we discovered. His patterns shifted to display complex mathematical sequences, a habit she'd grown to love. Species working together achieve consciousness evolution far more rapidly than those in isolation. The consortium's entire philosophy of separation was actually preventing the very advancement they claimed to protect. The aftermath of their transmission had been chaos, but not the kind the consortium had predicted. Instead of panic or violence, the revelation that different species could achieve deep connection had sparked a renaissance of cooperation. The proof had been in their own bond, a human and Meridian achieving synchronization that should have been impossible. The medical bay reports 3 new cases of cross-species resonance this morning, Sarah noted, turning to face him fully, all showing the same pattern signatures we first documented. Kexi's patterns rippled with joy. It's spreading faster than anyone predicted. Once people understood it was possible. He paused, all 4 eyes focusing on her with the intensity that still made her heart race. We showed them it was possible. The changes hadn't been easy. The consortium's power structure had crumbled in waves, leaving political vacuums that needed to be filled. But something remarkable had happened. Instead of fighting for dominance, species had begun cooperating, sharing insights about their different paths toward evolution. Ambassador Chen Zi, a voice called from behind them. They turned to find a young aide hurrying forward. The preliminary session is about to begin. They're requesting both of you to open the proceedings. Sarah nodded, exchanging a glance with Kexi. Their shared surname, a blend of human and Meridian naming conventions, had raised eyebrows at first. Now it was seen as a symbol of the new era they'd helped create. As they walked to the station's Grand Assembly Hall, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The gifting system had been abolished. The consortium's hidden technologies had been freely shared. But most importantly, the artificial barriers between species had begun to fall. The assembly hall was a sight that would have been impossible just months ago. Representatives from across the galaxy sat together, their different forms and energy patterns creating a tapestry of diversity. Some were purely organic, others partially synthetic, and a few existed as pure energy fields. All were equal here. Sarah and Kexi took their places at the speaker's platform, their naturally synchronized movements drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. They had become living proof that evolution wasn't just about technological advancement. It was about expanding the very definition of what connection could mean. Distinguished representatives, Sarah began, her voice carrying across the hall. 3 months ago, we stood against a system that claimed different species could never truly understand each other. That we had to be kept separate, our development controlled, our connections limited. Kexi's pattern swirled in harmony with her words as he continued. Today, we gather to prove that the path to advancement lies not in separation, but in unity. Not in control, but in freedom to choose our own way forward. The Nexus path, Sarah went on, is not a single road that must be regulated. It is as diverse as the species who seek it. Some will choose physical transcendence, others psychological evolution, and still others will find new paths we cannot yet imagine. But we will find these paths together, Kexi added, his patterns brightening. Because the greatest discovery we've made is that consciousness knows no boundaries of form. True connection, True understanding can bridge any gap. As if to demonstrate, their energy fields merged visibly, creating patterns of such complexity and beauty that the assembly hall fell silent in awe. What had once been considered impossible was now a beacon of hope for the galaxy's future. Later, after the session ended and the delegates dispersed to begin their real work, Sarah and Kexizy returned to their viewport. The stars seemed brighter somehow, full of new possibilities. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked softly. "Taking that risk, changing everything." Kexizy's patterns shifted to the intimate configuration only she could fully read. The consortium thought they gave you a gift to keep you controlled. Instead, they gave us both the key to unlocking the galaxy's true potential. Sarah leaned into their shared energy field, feeling the harmony between them that defied all the old rules. "So what's next for us, Ambassador Chenzi?" His patterns danced with laughter and love. "Evolution, my dear commander. Always evolution." Above them, the stars beckoned with promises of paths yet unexplored. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it as they had faced everything since that first fateful day. Together, proving with every breath that love and understanding could transcend any barrier, even those between the stars themselves. The consortium had wanted to prevent transcendence. Instead, they had inadvertently created the perfect conditions for a different kind of evolution, one based not on isolation, but on the infinite possibilities that arose when beings chose to trust, to connect, and to love across all boundaries. And that, perhaps, was the greatest gift of all.